I remember the message as if it had been folded into the quiet of my afternoon, the kind of moment that hums along without demand. "I told everyone we're taking a break," she said almost casually. My response was equally simple: "Okay. Thanks for telling me." That was it. No protests, no questions, no pleas. Just acknowledgement. It was a small message, easy to overlook in the day's current of emails and minor obligations. But I lingered on it. Not in bitterness, not in anger. Just in recognition. In the space of that single acknowledgement, a decision began to form quietly, a gentle yet deliberate assertion of my own boundaries. I could have argued. I could have called, asked for clarification, tried to negotiate the terms. Many would have, and perhaps she expected it. But I did nothing. I did not respond further. Instead, I reflected. The reflection was not dramatic. It was simply observation. Memories, small and precise, drifted forward. I remembered the times she brushed aside my ideas in conversation, laughed at the subtle anxieties I carried, or dismissed plans I had carefully organized. I did not linger on grievances, but the pattern was clear. This break, whether temporary or permanent, carried a kernel of truth I had ignored for too long. My autonomy had been quietly disregarded. I chose then to act in silence. The first move was mundane, almost ceremonial in its ordinariness. I updated my relationship status, not publicly broadcast, not with fanfare or declaration, just a simple, factual acknowledgement of change. In that act, I realized how much control had subtly shifted. She would notice, eventually, or perhaps someone close enough would mention it. The point was not to provoke but to register that I existed in my own space now. Days passed. Life carried its usual cadence. I returned to routines I had neglected, rediscovered old hobbies, and allowed myself to feel small victories in the ordinary: a coffee poured perfectly, a book read uninterrupted, a quiet walk that was mine alone. Each act seemed trivial, yet together they built a new framework of self-respect. There were moments of temptation, brief flickers, where I imagined sending a message, asking if the break could be reconsidered, seeking some recognition of shared history. But those moments were fleeting, replaced by a steadier awareness. The permanence of choice lies not in declaration but in quiet persistence. I had decided, subtly but irrevocably, that the break would remain unbroken. The first unmistakable moment of external consequence came weeks later, indirect but undeniable. A mutual friend mentioned casually, "I saw on social media you've been doing things on your own. Seems like you're handling the break well." No accusation, no judgment, only observation. And yet, in that simple statement, the reality settled. The shift was noticed, and its permanence could no longer be ignored. She, for her part, had not reached out. I had anticipated this. She would not, at least not immediately. Perhaps she assumed my silence meant acquiescence, or perhaps she believed the pause would invite reconciliation. She could not see the quiet work I had done, the careful restructuring of routines, the subtle reclaiming of agency, the deliberate absence of protest. In her mind, she still held the narrative. In reality, it had already moved beyond her grasp. I reflected often on why the shift felt so potent. It was not revenge. It was not an attempt to unsettle or humiliate. The power of this break lay in its restraint, its absence of spectacle. There was authority in the fact that I acted deliberately, calmly, and without audience. The world did not need to witness the shift for it to exist. That authority, the quiet yet undeniable control over my own choices, was enough. When she finally noticed, I imagine it came as a subtle shock. Perhaps she saw the social updates, perhaps someone mentioned my activities, or perhaps she simply felt the absence that could no longer be overlooked. I do not know the exact moment, and it does not matter. What mattered was the constancy of my own path, the deliberate pacing of my departure from her orbit. Internal conflict persisted, as it always does. Memory of warmth, laughter, and shared routines lingered. Nostalgia pressed against the boundaries I had set. There were days of quiet longing, evenings when I would replay conversations in my mind, weighing what might have been. And yet, the act of restraint, the conscious choice not to engage, not to argue, not to plead, remained my anchor. Each moment of hesitation passed without capitulation. Each memory became a mirror, not a chain. I noticed, too, the subtle shifts in my own perception. Time spent alone, decisions made without seeking approval, small achievements pursued for their own sake, they accumulated into a sense of self that was both new and quietly formidable. The break had been framed by her terms, but its permanence was determined entirely by mine. The ultimate authority, it seemed, resided not in drama or confrontation but in consistency, in the patient construction of independence. A friend once remarked, casually, "It's like you've moved on without anyone noticing." And yet everyone knows. That paradox, almost humorous in its subtlety, captured the essence of the power shift. It was quiet, controlled, and undeniable. She had assumed her declaration would invite chaos, or at least attention. Instead, it invited reflection, measured action, and ultimately, the demonstration that control could be exercised without noise. There were moments of doubt, fleeting but sharp. Was I too cold? Too distant? Could reconciliation, even partial, have been meaningful? These questions arose and dissipated like clouds across a muted sky. They mattered less than the steady accumulation of self-respect, the reinforcement of autonomy, the subtle but irreversible assertion of personal boundaries. In the end, the story concludes not with confrontation but with quiet victory. There is no celebration, no vindictive revelation, no dramatic unmasking. Instead, there is presence, a composed, deliberate inhabitants of my own life. The break remained permanent, not because of anger or retribution, but because of sustained restraint, strategic timing, and the unshakable acknowledgement that some distances, once respected, must remain. I carry forward, changed in imperceptible ways. Subtlety has replaced impulsivity. Reflection has replaced reaction. The emotional landscape is complex, tinged with memory, lightly shadowed by nostalgia, and yet defined by the deliberate creation of a space that is entirely my own. And she, when she realizes fully what has been done, will perceive the shift, not as spectacle, not as revenge, but as consequence. Quiet, controlled, and inevitable. The authority was mine all along, exercised not through force or spectacle, but through the meticulous, patient cultivation of self-respect. No one applauds, no one intervenes. The victory is internal, profound, and enduring. And so life continues, layered with memory, conscious choice, and the quiet knowledge that moving on does not require declaration, confrontation, or validation. It requires only clarity, patience, and the unshakable commitment to act, not in the heat of reaction, but in the cold light of deliberate, thoughtful choice.